As we rode down the runway, Mitchell and I noticed that the power on my right engine was not pulling full capacity, maybe only 50 inches instead of 60. So, but I was able to keep up. And as we assembled the 18 planes circling Henderson Field before heading out on the first leg of the mission, the number 3 man of the attack group couldn't get off. He blew a tire on takeoff, so obviously he didn't get off. His wingman got in the air but couldn't get fuel from his belly tanks, so he had to go back. So the attack group, which was supposed to be 4 aircraft, was down to 2. Fortunately, they planned 2 alternates, so they put those in place. That was Holmes and his wingman Hine. So now we're back to 4. So we're heading out on the first leg at 50 feet off the water in order to take advantage of the curvature of the earth. There were Japanese coast watchers all along the series of islands that we were trying to avoid. So we were a good 50 miles away from land. We were to be out of the sight of land and at the low enough altitude where no one could see these 18, now 16 planes heading for Bougainville. You can't fly a curved compass course. If you want to go from one place to another, you have to break it up into several legs in order to reach a destination. So it was designed to have 5 legs. And Mitchell naturally was concerned as we got underway. Is my compass accurate? Have I been staying on course? Did I turn to the second leg on time? Are the winds as we guessed they would be in the beginning? It was terribly boring, and Mitchell was wondering, if we do everything perfectly, are we going to be there on time? Is Yamamoto going to be there as we planned? We flew in this manner for over 2 solid hours. It was terribly boring, and it was hot as hell. And we had no references of any kind. There were no streets, no cities, no towns, no lakes, nothing, just open ocean. One wave looked the same as another. Finally, on the last leg, which is about 10 minutes from our designated target point, we were to continue. It was about an 8 to 10 minute flight. We were to stay at the 50-foot level until we sighted land. Well, after about 2 or 3 minutes, we sighted land, and Mitchell called everybody, let's wagged his wings, says, close in a little, we're going to start climbing. No sooner did we start to climb than Kenny, who was right behind me, number 3 from the lead flight, said, bogeys 11 o'clock high. I looked up, and sure enough, there were 2 bombers. We expected only 1, and 6 zeros. I couldn't believe it. After flying on 5 separate legs over a timed course, to arrive at the point within 1 minute was a miracle. That Mitchell was a magician.
Okay, now let me ask you some questions. So, when you were flying over, this water, like you said, was so boring, and for hours, how long was the?
Over 2 hours.
Yeah. So, what were you thinking about during that time? Or were you talking to your buddies? Or
Absolute radio silence. We couldn't use the radio.
right?
It's like sitting in a chair somewhere and just deciding that for the next 2 hours you're not going to sound or think of a damn thing. I have no idea what went through my mind. I had to watch the other planes. I particularly had to watch whether I got too close to the water, because we're only at 50 feet and you can drift down to 10 feet easily, or get up to 200 and then maybe be sighted and you ruin the whole mission.
Does it get noisier when you're close to the water like that? Does the
No,
sound of the
there's no
engine come back?
No, there's no difference in sound. You have both engines. There is a roaring sound, but subdued. The plane pretty much flies itself, except that you got to watch your altitude mostly. As far as the other planes, they were probably 100 or 200 feet apart. We weren't in real tight. If you started to nod, let's say like you were going to fall asleep, you might not realize who your leader is, because there's so many planes. You had to keep up your speed. It was just plain boring. Nothing to do, nothing to see.
Well, but you must have been excited though.
No.
Oh, you're right.
No, this was a typical combat mission that we'd been on 100 times before. And I didn't think about Yamamoto or shooting him down or anything. I just was flying my position. I was doing my job as it was assigned to me by Mitchell.
So no special excitement about the mission whatsoever, huh?
Not to me, it wasn't.
Huh. How do you think
I don't think to any of the guys, because it was an abstract thing. Maybe it was going to happen, maybe it wouldn't, and how would it happen? We had no idea. So maybe afterwards I wondered, what if Mitchell got off course? Would we know it? No, we had no way of knowing. We had a copy of the map, but I wasn't paying attention like I'm looking down his throat, to see that, make sure that he does the right thing. So we had complete trust in him as to where we were going and when did we turn on the next leg. There were 5 separate legs, the initial one, 3 in between, and the final leg. And all this time, totally out of sight of land. And I suppose as time went on, we wondered which leg we're on, because you can't, there's no mark, no highway, white lines out there. After the second, third, or fourth leg, we weren't sure on which leg we were on. Who's going to keep track of the pencil? Didn't matter. On the final leg, most of those 4 tracks were maybe 15 to 20 degrees off. We'd go this way for, let's say, 30 degrees, and then we'd go to 45, and then we'd go to 60, and so forth. The last leg was quite a wide maneuver, probably as much as 85 or 90 degrees change in course. So we knew we were on the final leg. And we were also heading into the sun, and it was a slight haze. So it was difficult, and you couldn't see anything, no land yet. Finally, outline of some low mountains came into view, and that's when Mitchell wagged his wings and says, let's move in closer. And shortly thereafter, we sighted land, barely off in the distance. And Mitchell started to climb, so everybody else did. And that's when the Canning, who is right behind me, said, bogey's 11 o'clock, high.
And then did you get excited?
No, we got busy because we had to come in close and start climbing. And I had trouble with one of my right engine. It wasn't pulling full power, so Mitchell was probably at full power. I was kind of staggering to keep up with him, and I knew that when he got to 14, I would probably be at maybe only a 12.5, but eventually I would catch up with him when he leveled off, which is what happened. So I was busy doing that. And then I'm flying around and I'm staying fairly close to Mitchell and not knowing what's going on below. I found out much later. Then I heard somebody, it sounded like Lanford, calling on the radio and says, "Mitch, did you see the bomber hit the jungle?" And I heard Mitchell say, "No, I didn't see any bomber hit the jungle. I saw a column of smoke, that's all." And obviously he was too high at 14,000 feet and not necessarily looking at the right spot at that moment. A few minutes later, somebody, I don't know who it was, says, "I need some help." So Mitchell and I peeled off and headed down to obviously chase off a Zero from a P-38. And we found one that was chasing a P-38, but we were going entirely too fast to be able to shoot that Zero down. All we did was scare it off by a short burst. Mitchell fired a short burst, I fired a short burst following him, and the Zero peeled off, and about that time Mitchell said, "Let's get the hell out of here," because we didn't want to face 75 Zeros about 50 miles away. We figured by that time they probably had been alerted to what's going on. They had no idea. It was a total surprise from the beginning. So we just headed out, and nobody paid any attention to anybody else. Everybody just headed for Guadalcanal in pairs, singles, whatever. Just go.
Now, were you excited at that point now, or are you still just normal?
No, we're still doing our mission.
Yeah.
You know. And if a couple of bombers were shot down, I didn't see it, and I was not told that they were. It's obvious that Mitchell, when he said, "Let's get the hell out of here," that the mission was over.
So how many missions had you been on equal to that? I mean, this was like the 30, how many?
110.
110 missions. Like
No, about 105. I flew only about 5 or 6 missions after this one mission.
Oh.
Because of the fact that we were recalled to the United States. But up until the time of the mission, I think well over 100.
So what was your first, do you remember your first mission?
Yes.
What was that?
I had to go back. I couldn't get fuel from my belly tank. I was humiliated.
Oh.
Because it looked like I was chickening out. So after getting back on the ground, I flew back and landed. The other 4 P-39s, not P-38s, that was our first mission, went out and they ran into some Japanese Zeros and they got shot up. And nobody was hurt, but they didn't accomplish well. When they got back, all 4 planes reported that their guns jammed.
So these equipment problems were happening constantly.
Well, the humidity was unbearably hot, you know, and wet. And we had armament and mechanics from another outfit. And anyway, when the planes landed and they opened up the covers of their guns, they were all rusted over. So I told Mitchell, I said, "Look, appoint me the armament officer and I'll straighten this thing out." So I did. And I grounded the airplanes for 2 days and we took every gun out and cleaned them up, new oil, and we had no more problem with jammed guns after that. Apparently nobody paid much attention to the maintenance of the armament. And of course that's the only purpose of the gun platform. Do what?
A little more tape.
A little more tape.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me ask you another. So your first mission, you got humiliated a little bit. And then what was your first successful mission that you remember?
Well, I really had no so-called, I did have a couple of successful ones, obviously, but when they happened in the 100 sequence, I really don't know. Maybe it was the 12th one or the 23rd or whatever. But we mostly was doing milk runs, they called them. 3, 4, or 5 planes going out looking for Japanese surface vessels because we carried 500-pound bombs. We also had 2-3 times a week we were assigned to strafe certain clumps of jungle where they claimed Japanese troops were concentrated. So we didn't have detailed graphic maps, but we had a pretty good eye. Off to the left and to the south of such and such a point on the ocean, on the beach, is where we think the Japs are. So we'd all climb up to 12,000, peel off, drive down, pull the thing, drop the bomb, not knowing whether we hit anything or not. We'd see a little smoke and an explosion, and that happened almost every time we went out on a mission of that type, the strafing mission. We knew Japs were out there, but exactly where, we had no way of knowing.
So, when you now, would you always see where the bomb landed, or would you just take off?
No, when you are at 12,000 feet and you turn over on your back and you head down, the airplane is upside down now, and it's coming down this way. It flies this way because the lift is on the wing, on the top of the wings. So unless you could fly backwards, you can't fly at an exact point. So you try to dive before the place where you want the bomb to drop, so that when you finally get down to 1,500 feet, you release the bomb, you're right on target. When you drop the bomb, you're going so fast at that time, probably 450 miles an hour, you pass through the target area and you have to turn around and look. But the smoke and whatnot still lingers from the bomb.
You didn't have any cameras built in the...
No cameras.
Never?
No.
In your career, you never had any camera? Or were there any cameramen in any of the crews that you were on? No. So when you see all this footage about the World War II bombing raids, where you see the movie footage...
That was by bombers. You very rarely see bombing by fighters.
Right.
In fact, I don't think I've ever seen any pictures of fighters bombing. Some of the guys had personal cameras and took a few pictures. And there were a few where they took a picture of their buddy strafing the jungle. But insignificant, really.
You weren't a photographer at that time much?
What?
You weren't doing any photography at that time?
No. I had a little Kodak camera, but I had no film.
How would you get film?
Kidding?
Good.
No. When we went to Australia, we probably could have bought some film, but I wasn't interested in that.
Were you able to get mail at that point? Or?
Yes, we were getting mail. In fact, I got a Coke bottle shipped to me by my mother. Bottle of Coke.
Huh.
I also had an Air Force ring, a ruby ring, a gold ring, and I lost the ruby.
No.
So I mailed the ring back, and they had it replaced and sent it back to me. So we were getting mail, yes. But they really had no idea where we were, because it was just an APO box that they...
For security reasons, probably.
Pardon?
Probably for security reasons.
No.
Yeah. So, anyway, getting back to that, so the highlight was the Yamamoto mission, but when did you realize really what you'd done and the excitement of it? Was after you came back, or when you got home, or when?
Well, when Mitchell said, let's get the hell out of here, we started in pairs and singles, whatever, just head for home. So I'm flying with Mitchell, and Holmes was flying alone, obviously. And we could hear, we're talking now, no more silence, radio silence. We heard him say he's getting awfully low on fuel, and somebody better, if there's anyone nearby, please watch where I may have to ditch so that rescuers can find me. As it turned out, Canning, the one who said Bogey's WWII, was nearby, and he saw Holmes, so he joined up with him. And if he had to go belly land in the water, he would circle that area and try to figure out exactly where that was so they could send somebody out, a PBY or a flying boat or something to rescue. About 50 miles from Guadalcanal, there was an island that we had sent engineering troops to build an airport. So they were constructing a runway on this island, the Russell Islands. Holmes noticed the island and said, maybe I can land on the beach, or near there at least, I could get to land. He noticed the construction, and it obviously was U.S. because there were trucks and bulldozers and so forth with American recognition signs. So he buzzed the field to get them to take the equipment off of the partial runway so that he could land. Well, they just waved at him. They thought he was just showing off, because that's a typical thing to do when you want to show off, is you buzz a field or a person. So Canning saw that, so he dropped his wheels and buzzed the field, and then they realized then that they wanted to land. So they quickly got all the equipment off of the runway, and Holmes went in and landed. He claims he only had 5 gallons of fuel left. Fortunately, John Kennedy's PT boat unit was not far away on another island, and we radioed over, the construction people radioed over to that island and had them send over some gasoline, because PT boats use the same engine as the P-38. So they sent up enough fuel for Holmes to hand pump it into his plane, and then he flew on to San Diego. And he arrived the next morning at Guadalcanal. And that's when we learned that Hine was lost, because his wingman was not with him. And to this day, we don't know what happened to her.